2010, James Harrison, a former British Army soldier, thought his days of danger were behind him, until a mysterious joint task force recruited him for a mission that would unravel the fabric of human history. Beneath the Antarctic ice, in a world untouched by sunlight for millennia, Harrison and his team discovered Lumina, a sprawling underground civilization of 2 million souls, descendants of humanity who fled the surface 15,000 years ago. Led by the enigmatic Luminans, tall, luminescent beings with advanced technology and a chilling knack for secrecy, they offered diplomacy but harbored suspicions of surface intentions. As Harrison navigated their glowing tunnels, artificial suns, and geothermal marvels, he uncovered a web of deceit. His own commander, Colonel Grayson, planned to steal Luminan technology, risking war between worlds. Torn between loyalty and ethics, Harrison's choices would shape the fate of two civilizations, leaving him to wonder. Could you face the truth of a hidden world beneath your feet, knowing it watches your every move? What would you do if the shadows of history reached out to claim you? The London rain was a cold, relentless drizzle on that gray morning in 2010, each drop a sharp reminder of the life I'd left behind. I stood outside the administrative building, my discharge papers clutched in a trembling hand, the ink still fresh, the words a final severing of a decade-long tether to the British Army. 10 years of service had carved their mark on me, physically in the scars that crisscrossed my back from a shrapnel blast in Iraq, and mentally in the memories of cave systems in Afghanistan, where the darkness had swallowed more than just light. I was 34, a civilian now, but the weight of my past clung to me like the damp chill of the city air, seeping into my bones with a restless ache that refused to settle. My flat in East London was a small, utilitarian space, its walls bare save for a single photograph of my unit in Kandahar, the faces of men I'd never see again staring back at me with frozen smiles. The first 3 months of civilian life passed in a haze of half-hearted job applications, warehouse supervisor, security consultant, nothing that sparked even a flicker of purpose, and too many pints at the local pub where the bartender knew my name but not my story. Most nights, I lay awake on a sagging mattress, the ceiling a blank canvas for my spiraling thoughts, the silence of the city a stark contrast to the chaos I'd known. I missed the structure of the army, the clarity of a mission, the camaraderie of men who understood the unspoken language of survival. Without it, I was adrift, a soldier without a war, haunted by the ghosts of a life I could no longer return to. It was on one such morning, after a grueling run through the mist-shrouded streets, that I first noticed them. 2 men in dark suits stood beside a black sedan, their presence a jarring intrusion on the quiet residential street. They were Americans, their accents sharp and clipped, their demeanor too polished for the East End. The taller one, James Harrison, stepped forward as I slowed to a walk, his gray eyes assessing me with a precision that made my skin prickle. "Depends who's asking," I replied, keeping my distance, my instincts honed by years of service kicking in as I eyed the shorter man, who stood silently, his hands clasped behind his back. "We represent a joint task force that could use someone with your particular skill set," the taller man said, offering a business card embossed with nothing but a name, Jameson, and a number. My skill set? I took the card, curiosity gnawing at me despite the weariness that had settled into my soul. They knew things they shouldn't, specifics of my operations in Afghanistan, the cave systems where I'd led teams through labyrinthine darkness, missions that were classified beyond even my own clearance level. Security clearance level 5, joint operation between several governments, the shorter man said, his voice a low rumble that carried the weight of authority. After 3 months of purposeless drifting, the pull of a mission was a siren song I couldn't resist. What followed was a week of grueling background checks and psychological evaluations, more intense than anything I'd endured in the army. They asked bizarre hypotheticals, how I'd handle extreme isolation, what I'd do if faced with an unexpected discovery that shattered my understanding of reality. I answered as best I could, but the secrecy surrounding the mission was suffocating, a heavy fog that obscured the path ahead. 2 weeks later, I boarded a military transport plane bound for Nevada, carrying only a small duffel of personal items. The facility was a sprawling complex in the desert, its low-lying buildings surrounded by multiple security perimeters, the air thick with the scent of dust and diesel. There were no signs, no markings, just concrete and steel, and men with guns who checked my credentials with a stern efficiency that felt both familiar and foreboding. "Welcome to nowhere, Harrison," the security officer said, the barest hint of a smile cracking his stone face as he handed back my temporary ID. I was escorted through a maze of corridors to a briefing room, the utilitarian space a stark reminder of countless military briefings I'd attended. But the man at the head of the table, Colonel Grayson, commanded attention in a way few officers ever had. His salt and pepper hair was cropped in a perfect military cut, his uniform pristine, his steel-gray eyes locking onto me with a cold efficiency that made my spine stiffen. "Harrison, good to have you on board," Grayson said, his voice devoid of warmth, his gaze assessing me as I took my seat. The room filled with 14 others over the next 10 minutes, a mix of ages and backgrounds, all carrying the alertness of military or intelligence operatives. I noted 5 women among them, accents revealing Americans, Canadians, Australians, and 3 other Brits besides myself. Grayson began without preamble, activating a screen that showed a satellite image of Antarctica. 3 months ago, our thermal imaging satellites detected an unusual heat signature beneath the ice sheet here, he said, pointing to a location that meant nothing to me without coordinates. Past expeditions to investigate similar anomalies have disappeared without trace. His voice was clinically detached, but the heavy silence that followed his words was a weight that pressed down on us all. Grayson's briefing was a masterclass in omission, every word carefully chosen to reveal just enough to keep us engaged, while hiding the true nature of what awaited us. "You've all been chosen because you can handle extreme isolation and extraordinary discoveries," he said, the pause before extraordinary, a crack in his otherwise impenetrable facade. Over the next hour, he outlined a training regimen that was as grueling as it was specific: specialized equipment, extreme weather conditioning, geological training, communication protocols for scenarios he refused to define. What struck me most was what he didn't say. The specifics of what we might find beneath the ice, the nature of the extraordinary discoveries he hinted at, the reason for the rigid compartmentalization that kept each team member in the dark about the other's roles. My quarters were Spartan. A twin bed and a desk the only furnishings, the walls a sterile gray that seemed to absorb the dim light of the overhead bulb. I was paired with Davis, a broad-shouldered American and former SEAL, his presence a quiet comfort in the sterile environment. "What's your read on all this?" he asked that first night, his voice low despite the fact that we were alone. I considered my answer carefully, the unease that had been building since the briefing coiling in my gut. "Too much compartmentalization," I said. "Nobody has the full picture except Grayson." Davis nodded, his eyes narrowing. "Geothermal anomaly, my ass. You don't assemble a team like this for a scientific expedition." The next few days confirmed my suspicions. The operations information structure was a labyrinth of need-to-know protocols, each team member receiving different briefings. Equipment specialists knew nothing of the geological training. Communications experts were kept in the dark about the specialized vehicles we'd be using. It was textbook military secrecy, but taken to an extreme that made my skin crawl. On the 3rd night, unable to sleep, I slipped out of my room for the bathroom, passing a partially open door to a secure communication room. Grayson's voice drifted out, clear and sharp in the stillness. "Yes, sir. The team is assembled. All preparations on schedule for making contact in January. We've updated the diplomatic protocols as requested. If they're as advanced as the intelligence suggests, we'll need to establish clear boundaries from the beginning." I moved past quickly, my mind racing. Making contact? Diplomatic protocols? This wasn't the language of scientific exploration. It was the language of encounter, of negotiation with an entity that required boundaries. The next morning, I caught Grayson alone in the corridor outside the mess hall, the hum of the facility a distant drone against the pounding of my heart. "Permission to speak freely, sir?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. He nodded, his steel-gray eyes unreadable. "We're not investigating a thermal anomaly, are we? We're preparing for contact with whoever lives under the ice. For the briefest moment, surprise flickered across his features, quickly replaced by a calculating calm. "Walk with me, Harrison," he said, his pace measured as we headed toward the training area. "What made you reach that conclusion?" he asked, his tone neutral but laced with an undercurrent of tension. "Your conversation last night, making contact, diplomatic protocols. That's not scientific exploration." Grayson nodded slightly, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Most of your teammates haven't put it together yet. Your file mentioned your analytical skills, but I'm still impressed." He stopped walking, turning to face me, his expression hardening. Evidence of an advanced civilization living beneath Antarctica was discovered in 1938 by German explorers. The Americans confirmed it during reconnaissance missions in the 1950s. We've maintained observation ever since, but never established direct contact, until now. My mind reeled at the implications, the weight of his words a physical force that pressed down on me. "What changed?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "They did," Grayson replied, his expression impassive. 6 months ago, we began receiving radio transmissions on specific military frequencies. They initiated contact, and our mission is first official diplomatic contact. His voice hardened as he continued. "This information is not to be shared with the other team members. They'll be briefed when necessary." I nodded, questions multiplying in my mind like shadows in the dark. Who were these underground dwellers? How had they remained hidden for so long? And why contact us now? That night, sleep evaded me, my thoughts a tangled web of possibilities. Grayson's parting words echoed in my mind. "You were selected partly because your psychological profile suggests you can handle major changes in how you see reality. Not everyone can. Remember that when you meet them." The real training began the next morning, the general briefings replaced by a regimen so specialized it could only have one purpose: preparing us for something extraordinary. Our days started at 0500 with physical conditioning tailored for extreme environments, the standard military fitness approach giving way to exercises developed for astronauts and deep-sea explorers, designed for bodies under unusual pressure and stress. "Your muscles will need to function efficiently with less oxygen," Dr. Sharma, our scientific lead, explained during our first session, her voice steady but her eyes betraying a flicker of unease. The atmospheric composition would differ significantly from what our bodies were accustomed to, and we spent weeks learning to use experimental breathing apparatus, lightweight but complex, with digital displays monitoring blood oxygen levels and environmental toxins. "This isn't standard military gear," Davis muttered to me during our third session, his hands adjusting the straps of his apparatus. "This is next-generation tech, not even available to special forces." I nodded, the realization sinking in. Someone had been developing this for years, specifically for this mission. By the second month, our training shifted to communication, the devices deceptively simple, earpieces with attached microphones and wristband controls, but their performance was revolutionary. These transmitters operate on frequencies that can penetrate dense rock and ice, the communications specialist explained, her voice tinged with awe. "Signal degradation is minimal even through 2 kilometers of solid material." During a practice exercise in a nearby cave system, I tested the range limitations, venturing deeper than instructed, the walls of the cave pressing in around me like a living thing. The signal remained crystal clear despite the massive rock between me and the surface team, a testament to technology that wasn't just advanced, it was otherworldly. Dr. Sharma's briefings grew increasingly specific, her lectures a window into a world we couldn't yet comprehend. She taught us about atmospheric composition in isolated subterranean environments, geothermal energy systems, and the biological adaptations needed for underground survival. "Pay careful attention to these mineral formations," she said during a geology lecture, displaying images of unusual crystalline structures that shimmered with an unnatural light. "They indicate the presence of geothermal activity that could support substantial energy requirements." Energy requirements for what? I wondered, the implications clear. We weren't preparing to find primitive cave dwellers, but something far more advanced. In the third month, we began training with prototype vehicles, sleek, cylindrical craft designed for narrow tunnels, their controls intuitive, responding to the slightest touch. During one simulation, I navigated a virtual tunnel system that twisted and narrowed unpredictably, the walls closing in with a claustrophobic intensity that reminded me of Afghanistan. "Excellent work, Harrison," Grayson noted afterward, reviewing my performance metrics with a nod of approval. "You adapt quickly to unfamiliar technology." I seized the opportunity to probe further. "Thank you, sir, though I'm curious about the design parameters. These vehicles seem built for specific tunnel dimensions. Do we have advanced knowledge of the exact environment?" His eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of suspicion crossing his features. "The designs are based on preliminary data from ground-penetrating radar. Focus on mastering the equipment, not questioning its origins." The psychological conditioning intensified in the 4th month, pushing the boundaries of mental endurance. We spent hours in sensory deprivation tanks, the darkness and silence of void that stripped away all sense of time and space, training our minds to endure isolation and disorientation. After one particularly grueling 9-hour session, I emerged to find 2 team members being escorted from the facility, their faces pale and drawn. "What happened?" I asked Davis as we watched them leave, the air heavy with unspoken tension. "Failed their psych evaluations," he replied quietly. "They showed some of us fabricated images yesterday, humanoid figures, but different. Those 2 didn't handle it well." "Different how?" I pressed, my stomach tightening. Davis hesitated, his voice barely above a whisper. "Larger eyes, elongated limbs, adaptations you'd expect from generations underground. Command wanted to see our reactions before we encounter the real thing." That night, I lay awake, the pieces falling into place with a chilling clarity. The breathing apparatus designed for different atmospheric conditions, the communication equipment that worked through rock, the vehicles built for specific tunnel systems. We weren't being prepared for discovery, but for encounter. By the 5th month, Grayson's private communications with Washington became more frequent, his absences from training sessions a growing source of unease. 3 times, I passed the secure communication room to find guards posted outside, while he spoke with someone he referred to only as director. My performance evaluations consistently ranked among the highest in the team. I excelled at adaptation exercises, scenario simulations, and the increasingly complex technical training. But the more I learned, the more I questioned the true nature of our mission. During a tactical planning session, I decided to push the boundaries of Grayson's secrecy. "Sir, our training suggests we're preparing for contact with a technologically advanced society, not primitive conditions," I said, my voice steady despite the tension in the room. "The satellite data must show more than just heat signatures." The room fell silent, several team members shifting uncomfortably, their eyes darting between Grayson and me. After a measured pause, Grayson nodded, his expression unreadable. "Perceptive, Harrison. Yes, ground-penetrating radar and quantum imaging have detected electromagnetic signatures consistent with advanced energy systems. We believe whatever or whoever lives beneath the ice possesses technology that may rival or exceed our own." His admission sent a ripple of shock through the team, many hearing this for the first time. In December 2011, 6 months after our arrival at the facility, we received our final briefings. The team, now reduced to 15 members after the psychological washouts, gathered in the main conference room, the high-resolution display showing detailed Antarctic topography. "What I'm about to share is classified at the highest levels," Grayson began, his voice a blade cutting through the tension. 3 months ago, we established radio contact with representatives claiming to be from an advanced human civilization beneath Antarctica. They speak multiple Earth languages and have expressed interest in formal diplomatic relations. The room erupted in gasps and murmurs, the reality of his words a seismic shift in our understanding. Dr. Sharma stepped forward, her voice trembling with a mix of awe and fear. "Their initial communications suggest they branched from surface humanity approximately 15,000 years ago, during the last major ice age. If accurate, their evolutionary path and technological development have occurred in isolation from ours." Grayson continued, his tone unyielding. "Your mission is to establish diplomatic contact, assess their technological capabilities, and evaluate potential threats to surface nations. You've been selected and trained for this specific purpose, to handle first contact with a human civilization that has evolved separately from our own for thousands of years. The January air was a razor against my skin as our military transport plane landed at McMurdo Station. Antarctica in summer, still a frozen hell that could strip the flesh from your bones in minutes. 6 months of training had prepared us for many things, but the raw reality of this isolation was a beast no simulation could tame. We spent 3 days acclimatizing, maintaining our cover as a specialized climate research team, the regular station personnel casting curious glances at our ill-fitting scientist disguises. "Remember your cover stories," Grayson reminded us during our final briefing, his voice a low growl. Minimal interaction with station staff. On the 4th morning, we boarded unmarked helicopters before dawn, the sky a bruised purple as we lifted off. Davis sat beside me, his breath visible in the frigid air. "Point 0, he said quietly over the helicopter noise, his eyes scanning the endless white terrain below. "You'll know it when you see it." After 3 hours of flying, we landed at coordinates 80 degrees south, 65 degrees east, a cluster of red tents coming into view, arranged in a perfect circle around a central structure. The setup mimicked a typical research station, but the armed guards positioned at regular intervals around the perimeter told a different story. "Climate researchers don't usually carry military-grade weapons," I said to Davis as we approached on foot, the snow crunching beneath our boots. He nodded, his eyes narrowing. "Or have motion sensors and ground-penetrating radar." Guards checked our credentials twice before allowing us into the central tent, where the research station facade dissolved entirely. The tent housed an elevator shaft, its lining a fascinating composite that maintained a consistent temperature despite the surrounding ice. A marvel Dr. Sharma couldn't resist examining. Grayson gathered us around a digital display showing what lay beneath. "This shaft descends 500 meters through the ice cap," he said, his voice steady. "From there, we'll transfer to specialized vehicles for the horizontal journey." The elevator was silent as we descended. No mechanical sounds or vibrations, the technology powering it far beyond anything I'd seen in military service. We dropped 500 meters in less than a minute, emerging into an underground hangar carved from the ice, 6 vehicles waiting. Sleek hybrids of military transports and snowmobiles, their treads designed specifically for ice traversal. "Mount up," Grayson ordered. 60 kilometers to the antechamber. The journey through the ice tunnels was surreal, our headlights illuminating walls of compressed blue ice that had formed over thousands of years, their surfaces smooth and uniform in a way that defied natural formation. "Were these tunnels already here when we found this place?" I asked over the comms, the question slipping out before I could stop it. "Focus on your driving, Harrison," came Grayson's immediate reply, but Davis's voice cut through on a private channel moments later. "No, they weren't." The implication sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the surrounding ice. Someone or something had carved these tunnels with a precision that spoke of advanced engineering. After 2 hours, the tunnel opened into a vast space that stole my breath. Grayson had called it the antechamber, its ceiling arching at least 30 meters overhead, the walls covered in thousands of carved symbols, a hybrid of Sanskrit and Egyptian hieroglyphics, their patterns flowing with a mathematical precision that suggested a language far older than any we knew. Dr. Sharma began documenting everything with specialized equipment, her voice trembling with awe. "These are extraordinary. The preservation in the ice. These could be thousands of years old." The security team fanned out, establishing a perimeter with practiced efficiency, placing sensors around the chamber, all feeding data back to a central console. "All readings normal, sir," Grayson's second-in-command reported. "Thermal imaging shows no movement beyond the southern wall." The southern wall was perfectly smooth, a stark contrast to the symbol-covered surfaces around it. "That's our entry point," Grayson announced, directing equipment to be positioned facing it. "Prepare for final descent protocol." We trained for this moment for months, but standing in an ancient ice chamber beneath Antarctica, preparing to make contact with an unknown civilization, felt like stepping into a dream or a nightmare. I checked my breathing apparatus and communication equipment, noting the tension in my teammates' faces, a mix of focused concentration and poorly concealed anxiety. Then it happened, without warning. A section of the smooth southern wall slid aside, the opening appearing without sound. 3 figures emerged, their presence a shock that rooted us to the spot. They looked human, but different, taller, at least 6.5 feet, with slender builds, their skin pale with a subtle luminescence that captured and reflected the smallest amount of light. Their eyes were larger than human norms, set in faces of striking symmetry, and they wore silver jumpsuits that fit perfectly, the material metallic yet soft, unlike any fabric I'd ever seen. The central figure spoke, his voice delivering a shock that echoed through the chamber. "Welcome to the outer threshold," he said in perfect, unaccented English. "We've been expecting your arrival." The chamber fell silent, our team frozen in disbelief, some reaching for weapons, others simply staring. Grayson recovered first, stepping forward with practiced confidence. "I am Colonel Grayson, leading this expedition on behalf of a coalition of surface nations." The central figure inclined his head slightly, his movements fluid and precise. "I am Counselor Thean, diplomatic representative of the Luminan Council." His eyes swept over our group with a calm assessment that made my skin prickle. "We've monitored your approach since you established your base camp above. Before that, we observed your surface communications to learn your languages and customs." Dr. Sharma stepped forward, her voice trembling with a mix of awe and curiosity. "You monitor our communications. For how long?" Thean smiled, a subtle curve of his lips that was both welcoming and unnerving. "We maintain observation outposts near the surface. Radio waves pass easily through ice. We've studied all major surface languages for over a century." I analyzed every aspect of Thean and his companions, their fluid movements, their voices that carried perfectly without seeming to project, the way their luminescent skin seemed to glow faintly in the dim light of the chamber. "How is survival possible in these conditions?" I asked, the question slipping out before I could think about protocol. Thean turned his attention to me, his larger-than-human eyes unblinking. "Your name, James Harrison. To answer your question, what you see here is merely the threshold. This is not where we live." He gestured toward the opening behind him. "We would like to invite you to witness Lumina, our home. There, your questions about our survival and history can be properly addressed." Grayson stepped forward, his voice firm. "Before we proceed, we need to establish security protocols for our team." Thean's response was smooth, almost too perfect. "Your weapons and communications equipment will function within our territories, though certain energy signatures may experience interference. We have no intention of isolating or disarming your team." The concession surprised Grayson, who had clearly expected resistance on the weapons issue. As the technical and security staff began preparations for entering the opening, Grayson pulled me aside, his grip on my arm just above the elbow of ice. "A word, Harrison," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper as he led me several meters away from the group. "I saw the look on your face. You're already fascinated by them." His grip tightened, his steel-gray eyes boring into mine. "Remember, your first loyalty is to this mission, to the surface, regardless of what we discover beyond that door, regardless of how impressive or benevolent they might appear." I met his gaze, my voice steady despite the unease coiling in my gut. "Which are what, exactly? Because diplomatic contact seems to be going well so far." His eyes hardened, a flicker of something dangerous crossing his features. "Our primary mission is to assess and secure information, technology, strategic advantage. These are our objectives, not friendship." He released my arm and returned to the group, leaving me with a cold feeling that had nothing to do with the surrounding ice. Thean consulted briefly with his companions, their conversation inaudible despite the chamber's acoustics, a quick resolution that spoke of a unity we couldn't hope to match. "We are prepared to escort you now," Thean announced. "The journey to Lumina will take approximately 1 hour through our transit system." As our team gathered equipment and prepared to enter the doorway, Davis appeared at my shoulder, his voice a low murmur. "Quite the reception committee. Ready to see what's behind door number 1. Not sure anyone's ready for that, I replied, my eyes flicking between Theon's calm demeanor and Grayson's calculated intensity. But I'm more concerned about what we're bringing with us. He nodded, his expression grim. Watch your back, and not just around them. The tunnel beyond the doorway defied all natural laws, its walls perfectly smooth, illuminated by an odd luminescence that provided enough light to see without being harsh on the eyes. Dr. Sharma ran her fingers along the wall as we walked deeper, her voice trembling with awe. It's not ice anymore, some kind of composite, a silicate-based material. Theon explained, his tone calm but precise. Of our design, it maintains consistent temperature and provides illumination without external power sources. The tunnel widened into a large chamber where several vehicles waited, elongated pods with no visible wheels or propulsion systems, hovering a few inches above the ground. These will transport us to Lumina, Theon said. The journey takes approximately 1 hour through our transit network. Dr. Sharma's eyes lit up with fascination. Electromagnetic propulsion? Theon's lips curved in that unervingly perfect smile. A simplified explanation, but essentially correct. We boarded the vehicles, 6 team members to each pod with 1 Luminan guide. I found myself sharing with Davis, Dr. Sharma, and 3 security personnel, Grayson traveling in the lead vehicle with Theon. There were no handles or seat belts, yet when the pod accelerated, some invisible force kept us comfortably in place, a marvel Dr. Sharma couldn't resist analyzing. Inertial dampening, she whispered, her eyes wide. Theoretical physics made real. The journey through the tunnel network was like nothing I'd experienced, moving at extraordinary speeds with almost no sensation of movement. The tunnels branching and merging in an intricate web that suggested centuries of engineering. Glowing symbols appeared at intervals along the walls, navigational markers perhaps, or something else entirely. How far down are we? I asked our guide, Laura, her luminescent skin casting a faint glow in the dim pod. Currently, we are traveling at approximately 2.7 kilometers beneath the ice sheet, she replied, her voice calm. The depth will increase as we approach Lumina proper. Davis sat beside me, his hand occasionally brushing the sidearm holstered beneath his jacket. Remarkable engineering, he commented softly. Perfect tolerances on these tunnels. After an hour, our vehicle slowed, approaching a massive wall of the same luminescent material that lined the tunnels. A seam appeared in its center, widening to create an opening large enough for our vehicles to pass through. What lay beyond stole my breath. We emerged onto a platform overlooking a vast underground world, Lumina, a cavern that extended farther than seemed possible, its ceiling arching kilometers above us, studded with crystals that refracted light throughout the space. At the very top hung an artificial sun, a perfect sphere of golden white light that illuminated everything below with an approximation of natural daylight. My God, Dr. Sharma whispered beside me, her voice trembling with awe. The city itself defied description, structures of varying shapes and sizes rising from the cavern floor, some reaching nearly to the ceiling. They weren't buildings in the conventional sense, more like sculpted formations that blended organically with their surroundings, connected by a network of bridges, platforms, and the same electromagnetic transit system we'd used to arrive. Welcome to Lumina, Theon said as he approached from the lead vehicle. One of 7 primary habitation centers of our civilization. 7? I asked, struggling to process the scale of what I was seeing. Yes, connected by the transit network you experienced. Our total population remains stable at approximately 2 million inhabitants across all centers. 2 million people living beneath the Earth's surface, completely unknown to the world above. The implications were staggering. Grayson stood beside Theon, his military composure temporarily shaken by the sight before us. How long has this been here? He asked, his voice steady but laced with a rare note of awe. Lumina was established approximately 15,000 years ago, during what your scholars call the last glacial maximum, Theon replied. When surface conditions became increasingly hostile, a portion of humanity chose to seek shelter beneath the earth rather than migrate across the surface. That contradicts our understanding of human technological development, Dr. Sharma interjected, her voice sharp with curiosity. The capabilities needed to create this weren't possible for humans 15,000 years ago. Thean nodded, his tone shifting subtly. You are correct. We were aided by the architects, those who came before. Their origins and ultimate fate remain subjects of scholarly debate even among our historians. What matters is that they provided the foundation for our civilization. Knowledge of geothermal energy, artificial illumination, and sustainable underground habitation. I noted how quickly he pivoted away from details about these mysterious architects. A flicker of unease coiling in my gut. We were ushered toward another transport platform, Thean explaining as we boarded. You will be provided accommodations in our diplomatic quarter. From there, you may rest and prepare for more comprehensive exchanges tomorrow. The diplomatic quarter was a collection of structures near the eastern edge of the cavern. Their interiors surprisingly familiar, furnished with beds, chairs, and tables that resembled surface furniture, though made from materials I didn't recognize. We've prepared these spaces based on our understanding of your comfort requirements, Thean explained. If adjustments are needed, please inform the attendants. The attendants were younger Luminans, their movements precisely calculated, their politeness a mask that suggested we were being evaluated with every interaction. A remarkable achievement, Grayson commented as he surveyed the accommodations, his voice steady but his eyes scanning every detail. Your civilization has flourished in isolation. Not complete isolation, Thean corrected, his tone sharp. We maintain observation posts near the surface. Your radio communications have been particularly informative over the past century. That explained their perfect English and knowledge of current events. I wondered what else they had learned while we remained oblivious to their existence. Why choose now to initiate contact? Dr. Sharma inquired, her voice steady despite the weight of the question. Thean's expression grew serious, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his features. Necessity. Our sensors have detected increasing drilling activities from surface nations. Several operations have approached dangerously close to our outer tunnel systems, oil exploration among other activities. Rather than risk accidental discovery that might prove destabilizing for both societies, we determined that controlled diplomatic relations would be preferable. The first week in Lumina followed a structured program of guided tours and presentations. The Luminans determined to showcase their achievements while carefully controlling our access. On the third day, Thean led us to their medical sciences division, a complex of interconnected structures attached to the cavern walls. Dr. Sharma could barely contain her excitement as a Luminan physician demonstrated their diagnostic technology, a handheld device that scanned body systems without physical contact. This identifies cellular abnormalities at their earliest stages. The physician explained, his voice calm. Most conditions your surface medicine considers incurable are simply addressed before they manifest symptoms. Cancer? Alzheimer's? Autoimmune disorders? Dr. Sharma asked, her voice trembling with awe. All effectively eliminated from our population centuries ago, came the reply. I watched Grayson's face during these demonstrations. While the rest of us showed amazement, his expression remained calculated, his eyes taking inventory of assets rather than marveling at the technology. The energy systems were equally remarkable. On the fifth day, we visited a geothermal tap that extended deep into the Earth's crust, a pulsing column of blue-white light at its center. This single facility powers all of Lumina, our guide explained. The energy is drawn directly from the planetary core, converted through processes your physics has theorized but not yet implemented. Zero emissions. Limitless power, Davis murmured beside me, his voice low. How many of these facilities exist? Grayson asked suddenly, his tone sharp. The guide hesitated before answering. There are 17 major geothermal taps across our network, each serving multiple habitation centers. I noted how Grayson nodded slightly, storing the information, not the technological wonder, but the strategic distribution. By the end of the first week, a routine emerged. Mornings spent touring Luminan achievements, afternoons documenting our observations, evenings in the diplomatic quarter comparing notes. But something changed after our visit to the transportation hub. a central facility that connected all 7 Luminen habitation centers through the same electromagnetic tunnels we'd experienced on arrival. A 3-dimensional holographic map showed the entire system, thousands of kilometers of tunnels spanning beneath continents and ocean floors. The primary network was established by the architects, Thean explained as we stared at the glowing pathways. We've expanded and maintained it over millennia. These extend beneath every continent, Grayson observed, studying the map with particular intensity. Yes, Thean replied, his expression guarded. Though many peripheral tunnels were sealed after the Great Division, a period of conflict approximately 8,000 years ago, some factions wished to maintain regular contact with the surface world. Others advocated complete separation for security. The separatists prevailed. That evening, Grayson didn't join us for the usual debriefing, a pattern that continued over the following days as he engaged in private meetings with senior Luminen officials. On the 8th day, we toured the agricultural sector, vast chambers housing hydroponic systems bathed in precisely calibrated light, plants growing in spiral patterns that maximize space in 3 dimensions. We produce all nutritional requirements for our population within these chambers. Our guide, a younger Luminen named Aurora, explained. The system is entirely self-sustaining. I hung back as the team moved ahead, seizing the opportunity to probe deeper. In all your observations of the surface world, have you ever intervened? I asked quietly, keeping my voice low. Aurora glanced around before answering, her voice barely above a whisper. There have been occasions when limited intervention was deemed necessary, your Cuban Missile Crisis, for instance. Certain communication failures that might have escalated to nuclear exchange were redirected. The revelation sent a chill down my spine. You prevented nuclear war? The Council determined that radioactive contamination on such a scale would eventually threaten our habitats, she replied. Similar calculations have motivated other interventions throughout your history. Before I could ask more, she rejoined the group, leaving me with troubling questions about how much of surface history had been shaped by unseen hands. That night, I couldn't sleep, the implications of Aurora's words a weight that pressed down on me. Grayson's secretive behavior, the Luminans' influence on surface events, the advanced technology they wielded. Something wasn't adding up about our mission parameters. My opportunity came unexpectedly on the 10th day. After touring a cultural archive, Grayson announced he needed to freshen up before the evening meal, leaving his communications device on a side table in the common area. An uncharacteristic oversight for someone so disciplined. I waited until the room cleared, then accessed the device, my military background in signals intelligence guiding my movements as I navigated the secure communications without leaving traces. What I found confirmed my suspicions. A message thread with someone identified only as Director contained explicit instructions. Priority objectives remain defense systems and propulsion technology. Geological mapping of all access points is essential. Prepare preliminary assessment of acquisition challenges. Acquisition, not understanding or diplomatic exchange, but theft. I memorized the key details before returning the device exactly as I'd found it, my mind racing as Davis entered the common area. I motioned him to follow me to a spot near a flowing water feature, where conversation would be harder to overhear. I need to know something, I said without preamble. What's the real mission here? Davis's expression confirmed he knew more than he'd shared. What did you find? Grayson's communicating with someone called Director. They're mapping Luminen defenses, cataloging technology for acquisition. This isn't a diplomatic mission. Davis sighed, his shoulders dropping slightly. Not for everyone on the team, no. The official parameters are what you were told. Establish diplomatic contact, cultural exchange, but certain team members have secondary objectives. Military intelligence gathering, mapping the tunnel network, identifying structural weaknesses, cataloging technology with military applications. Why tell me now? I pressed, my voice low but urgent. Because you're smart enough to figure it out anyway, he replied, glancing around the empty space. And because I'm not sure I agree with the approach. These people aren't a threat. They could have wiped us out centuries ago if they wanted to. That evening, I paid closer attention to my teammates' movements, noticing 3 security team members, loyal to Grayson, separating briefly from the group at strategic intervals during our tour of a Luminan Educational Center, each time adjusting something on their equipment belts. After dinner, I retraced our path, finding a small device attached to a wall near an environmental control panel, a surveillance transmitter designed to capture audio and energy signatures. We weren't just gathering information during our tours, we were bugging Lumina, preparing for something beyond diplomatic relations. By the start of our third week in Lumina, the air had changed, the Luminans' perfect hospitality tainted by a subtle shift in their demeanor. Guards appeared at intersections where none had stood before, access to certain areas became restricted without explanation, and Theon's diplomatic pleasantries seemed more rehearsed, his eyes watching us with increased alertness. I noticed these changes during our morning tour of a communications facility. While the others marveled at holographic data transmission, I counted the new security personnel at least double from the previous week. Something had changed, and I suspected it involved the surveillance devices Grayson's team had planted. That afternoon, a young Luminan aide approached me as our group returned to the diplomatic quarter. "James Harrison, Council Leader Maris requests your presence," she said quietly. "Alone." Davis caught my eye from across the room, his expression questioning, but I gave him a subtle nod. I'd fill him in later. I followed the aide through corridors I hadn't seen before, deeper into the administrative section of Lumina, the architecture growing more formal, with high ceilings and intricate patterns of light embedded in the walls. We passed through 3 separate security checkpoints, each staffed by Luminans with a military bearing, before stopping before a set of doors made from a material resembling polished obsidian. "Council Leader Maris awaits you inside," the aide said, then departed. The doors slid open silently, revealing a circular chamber with a domed ceiling displaying real-time star patterns. An impossible feat given our location beneath the Antarctic ice. In the center stood a woman I recognized from glimpses during Grayson's meetings. Taller than most Luminans, her age indeterminate, her presence commanding even in the stillness of the room. "James Harrison," Maris said, her voice deeper and more resonant than Theon's. "Thank you for coming. Please join me." She gestured to a seating area with 2 chairs positioned beside a small fountain that bubbled with luminescent blue water. "I've been hoping for an opportunity to speak with you directly," she continued once I was seated. "You've shown particular insight during your time with us." I kept my expression neutral, my mind racing. "I appreciate the invitation, Council Leader Maris." "Please," she said, her larger-than-human eyes unblinking as she studied me. "I'll be direct, James. Our monitoring systems have detected surveillance devices placed throughout Lumina during your team's visits. Sophisticated technology, though primitive by our standards." My stomach dropped, the weight of her words a physical force that pressed down on me. She knew. "You don't seem surprised," she observed, her voice calm but laced with an undercurrent of steel. I weighed my options carefully, loyalty to my team versus the ethics of what we were doing. The surveillance wasn't officially part of my mission parameters, but I'd said nothing when I discovered it. "I became aware of the devices recently," I admitted, choosing my words with care. "Not all team members were informed of this aspect of the mission." "Yet you said nothing," Maris replied, her tone unreadable. "I was still determining the best course of action," I said, meeting her gaze. She nodded, seemingly satisfied with my honesty. "Rather than confront your team directly, I wanted to understand the surface government's true intentions. Perhaps you can illuminate this for me." I took a deep breath, the weight of my decision a blade poised above my future. "Based on communications I've intercepted, Colonel Grayson appears to have military objectives beyond our stated diplomatic mission, technology assessment, defense capabilities, access points to your tunnel system. His orders seem focused on acquisition rather than exchange." Maris sighed, a surprisingly human gesture that softened her otherwise unreadable features. "I'm not surprised, though I am disappointed. We had hoped this official contact might be different." She rose and approached a control panel embedded in the wall, activating a display showing a timeline of dates and locations: 1947, 1968, 1984, 2003. Previous surface expeditions that attempted similar intelligence gathering. Some military, some scientific in appearance, all with the same objective: to assess and potentially acquire our technology. I stared at the display, the implications sinking in. This wasn't the first contact scenario Grayson had presented. Surface governments had known about the Luminans for decades. The Council debated extensively before allowing your team access to Lumina. Maris continued, her expression hardening. Many argued against it, citing these previous violations, but some of us believed that formal diplomatic recognition might lead to more productive engagement. I'm beginning to think the skeptics were correct. Not everyone on our team shares Grayson's agenda, I told her, my voice steady despite the turmoil in my mind. Some of us genuinely want peaceful exchange. I know, Maris replied, her tone softening. That's why you're here and not in detention. Your ethical conflict has been evident in your neural patterns since you discovered the surveillance. You can monitor our thoughts? I asked, unable to hide my alarm. Not specific thoughts, she clarified. Our technology can detect patterns of neural activity associated with conflict, deception, or distress. It's how we've survived millennia of isolation, by accurately assessing threats. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes unblinking. Tell me honestly, James, what would you do in my position? The question caught me off guard. The weight of her gaze a physical force that pressed down on me. If I learned visitors to my home were secretly planting surveillance, I'd remove them immediately. Yet we haven't, Maris replied, her expression unreadable. We're still evaluating which of you can be trusted. This conversation is part of that assessment. Before I could respond, her communication device chimed softly. She checked it, then looked back to me with a slight smile. It seems Colonel Grayson has just been informed that your team has been granted access to our central technology hub tomorrow. A gesture of goodwill from the Council. I'm curious to see what choices you make with this information, James Harrison. She stood, signaling our meeting was over, and I left the chamber with a troubled mind. The Luminans knew about our covert activities but were playing a deeper game. They wanted to see who would betray them and who could be trusted. I returned to the diplomatic quarter to find the team gathered in the common area, excitement buzzing through the room as Grayson addressed them. Tomorrow represents a significant breakthrough, he announced, his voice steady but laced with a calculated ambition I now recognized. The Luminans have granted us access to their central technology hub, the heart of their power and communication systems. Dr. Sharma looked genuinely thrilled, her voice trembling with awe. This is extraordinary. Their energy conversion systems alone could revolutionize our understanding of physics. Grayson nodded, his expression professionally pleased, but I saw the truth beneath the facade. As the meeting broke up, I noticed Grayson motion for 3 security team members to stay behind. I pretended to leave but lingered just outside the doorway, positioning myself where I could overhear their conversation. Tomorrow initiates Phase 2, Grayson said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. While the scientists are occupied with the main exhibits, your team will secure access to the targeting systems and propulsion technology. Davis will create a distraction if needed. Sir, what about extraction? One of the security team asked. Transport is prepared. Once we have the core technology samples, we move quickly. The diplomatic team will remain as cover while we transfer the priority materials. I withdrew before they noticed me, my mind racing. This wasn't just surveillance. They were planning to steal Luminan technology and leave some of us behind. I found Davis alone in his quarters, reviewing notes from our previous tours. We need to talk, I said, closing the door behind me. He looked up, his expression guarded. What's wrong? Grayson just mentioned you as part of Phase 2 tomorrow. Something about creating a distraction while they secure technology samples. I overheard him. Are you part of this, Davis? His eyes widened slightly, then narrowed, a flicker of guilt crossing his features. Not the way you think. Grayson approached me yesterday, said he needed someone he could trust for a special security operation. I figured it was better to know what he was planning than be blindsided. And you didn't think to tell me? I pressed, my voice low but urgent. I was going to tonight, he replied, leaning forward, his voice earnest. Look, I don't like this any more than you do. These people haven't shown any hostility. This feels wrong. I believed him, but I needed to confront Grayson directly. Be careful, Davis warned as I left his quarters. He's been different since we arrived. More secretive, more driven. I found Grayson in his quarters, reviewing schematics of what appeared to be the technology hub on his tablet. He looked up when I entered, quickly deactivating the display. Harrison, what can I do for you? I'd like to understand what's really happening tomorrow, sir, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil in my mind. His eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of suspicion crossing his features. It's a scientific exchange, as announced. With all due respect, Colonel, I know about Phase 2. We were silent for a moment, Grayson's expression hardening, then relaxing into something almost like relief. Close the door, Harrison, he said. I did, then stood at parade rest, waiting. You've always been perceptive. It's why you were selected, he began, setting his tablet aside. What exactly do you think you know? You're planning to acquire Luminen technology samples during the tour tomorrow, I said, my voice steady. Davis is meant to create a distraction while a security team secures the targets. Grayson studied me for a long moment, then nodded. That's part of it. Sit down, Harrison, you've earned the truth. I took the chair across from him, keeping my face neutral despite the anger simmering beneath the surface. The surface governments are afraid, Grayson said bluntly, and they should be. We've known about the Luminans for decades. Isolated encounters, recovered technology, intercepted signals. What we've learned is that they possess technological capabilities centuries beyond our own. They've shown no hostility, I pointed out, my voice steady despite the weight of his words. Grayson leaned forward, his voice taking on an intensity one hadn't heard before. They monitor all our communications. They've interfered in our affairs. Aurora practically admitted they manipulated the Cuban Missile Crisis. They have tunnel networks beneath every continent on Earth, and they've chosen to remain hidden, watching us. What happens when they decide surface humans are too dangerous to leave alone? I remained silent, letting him continue. Our mission was never just diplomatic contact. It's preemptive security. We need to understand their capabilities and acquire technological leverage, not for aggression, for survival. By stealing their technology? I asked, my voice sharp. By securing technological parity, Grayson replied, his expression hardening. Make no mistake, Harrison. The Luminans are not sharing their most advanced systems with us. What they've shown is carefully curated, impressive, but limited. Their true defensive and offensive capabilities remain hidden. And tomorrow? I pressed, my voice steady despite the turmoil in my mind. Tomorrow we secure key examples of their propulsion and energy systems, enough to reverse engineer the principles, Grayson said, leaning back to study me. You're one of our best, Harrison. I want you to lead the acquisition team. There's significant financial compensation waiting when we return to the surface with these samples. Your future would be secure. I needed to appear to consider his offer, to keep his trust long enough to decide my next move. How would we get the technology out? I asked, my voice neutral. The Luminans monitor everything. Grayson smiled slightly, a flicker of triumph crossing his features. Their monitoring isn't as perfect as they'd like us to believe. We've developed countermeasures based on previous encounters. The extraction team will create a diplomatic incident as cover for the technology transfer. And the rest of the team, Dr. Sharma and the others? I asked, my stomach tightening. They'll remain as planned to complete the diplomatic mission. Their ignorance is genuine and useful. I nodded slowly, as if processing the plan. I'll need to review the specifics before tomorrow. Of course, Grayson replied, seemingly satisfied with my response. Report back at 0600 for final briefing. This operation will transform Earth's security posture. Harrison, you're part of something historic. I left his quarters with my decision already made. Whatever the Luminans' true nature and intentions, theft and deception weren't the answer. The potential consequences for both civilizations were too grave. I needed to find Theon. The Luminan communication device we'd been given for emergencies sat on my bedside table, its surface smooth and cold against my fingers. I activated it, requesting an urgent meeting with Counselor Thean, the response coming almost immediately. He would meet me in the small meditation garden adjacent to our quarters in 10 minutes. The garden was a peaceful space, living plants growing in spiral patterns around a central pool, their bioluminescent flora casting a faint glow in the dim light. Thean was already waiting when I arrived, his tall shape silhouetted against the glowing plants, his larger-than-human eyes unblinking as he greeted me. "James Harrison, this is unexpected. I need to speak with you about tomorrow's visit to the technology hub," I said, my voice steady despite the weight of my decision. Thean's expression remained diplomatic, but I sensed a heightened alertness in his posture. "What concerns you?" "Grayson is planning to steal samples of your propulsion and energy technology during the tour," I said, the words a weight that lifted from my chest as I spoke them. "He has a team prepared to create a distraction and secure the samples. I believe they have developed some means to counteract your surveillance." To his credit, Thean didn't appear shocked, his expression unreadable as he studied me. "You're betraying your commanding officer and your mission." "Why?" "Because it's wrong," I said simply, meeting his gaze. "And because the consequences could be disastrous for both our peoples." Thean studied me for a long moment, then touched a control on his wrist device. "Security protocols are now active. Thank you for your warning, James Harrison." Almost immediately, the environment shifted. The lighting throughout the diplomatic quarter turned a subtle red hue, the doors leading to the main corridor sealing with a soft hiss. "What will happen to the others?" I asked, my stomach tightening. "Those involved in the planned theft will be detained using non-lethal methods," Thean replied, his voice calm but devoid of its earlier warmth. "Those truly innocent will be treated with respect. Please remain here." Through the garden's open archway, I watched as Luminan security forces entered the diplomatic quarter. Tall figures carrying slender devices that resembled wands rather than conventional weapons, moving with practiced efficiency toward Grayson's quarters and the rooms of the security team members I'd seen him briefing. I heard a brief commotion, a strange buzzing sound, then silence. Minutes later, Davis appeared at the garden entrance, escorted by a Luminan guard, confusion clear on his face. "James, what's happening?" he asked, his voice tense. "Security measure," I replied, not yet ready to reveal my role. 2 more team members joined us, Dr. Sharma and a junior scientist named Rivera, both looking concerned but not frightened. Thean returned with Council Leader Maris and several other Luminans I didn't recognize, their expressions solemn as they gestured for us to be seated on the curved benches surrounding the central pool. "We expected this betrayal," Maris said without preamble, her voice steady but laced with disappointment. "Though we hoped for better." Previous surface expeditions followed similar patterns. Diplomatic overtures followed by attempted technology appropriation. Dr. Sharma looked stunned, her voice trembling with disbelief. "I knew nothing about this. Our mission was scientific and diplomatic exchange." "We know," Maris assured her. Neural monitoring confirmed which team members were genuinely unaware of the covert objective. Davis looked at me, realization dawning in his eyes. "You warned them." I nodded, my voice steady despite the weight of my decision. "Grayson revealed the true mission parameters to me tonight, offered me leadership of the acquisition team. I made the ethical choice. Stealing their technology wouldn't lead to security for either of our civilizations. It would start an escalation with unpredictable consequences." Maris stepped forward, her presence commanding respect even in crisis. "The Council allowed this contact to identify which surface representatives could be trusted. We've monitored your reactions, your choices, your neural responses to our civilization. Some of you have proven yourselves worthy of trust." She looked directly at me, then at Davis, Dr. Sharma, and Rivera. "Lumina is now in security lockdown. All access points to the surface are sealed." "What about Grayson and the others?" Rivera asked nervously, her voice trembling. "They will be detained until the Council decides their fate," Thean answered, his tone unyielding. "No harm will come to them, but they have violated the most basic principles of diplomatic exchange." Davis moved closer to me, speaking quietly. Did you make the right call? They've locked down everything. I watched as Luminant security personnel moved efficiently through the diplomatic corridor, securing areas and establishing new protocols. Yes, I answered with conviction. Grayson's plan would have triggered something much worse than a lockdown. This is a civilization with technology centuries beyond ours and tunnel access beneath every continent. Consider the alternatives if they felt genuinely threatened. 3 days passed after the lockdown of Lumina, the Luminant security forces keeping us separated from Grayson and his conspirators, treating us with a cautious respect that suggested our status remained undetermined. My quarters became a comfortable cell, all amenities provided but no freedom to leave. On the morning of the 4th day, a Luminant aide arrived to escort me to the council chamber, the same place where I'd spoken privately with Maris, but this time the full council would be present. The others from your team who were uninvolved will join us shortly, she explained as we walked. What about Grayson and his security team? I asked, my stomach tightening. They are being dealt with separately. The council chamber had transformed, the intimate meeting space now featuring a circular arrangement of elevated seats for the council members. A table with 4 chairs in the center for me, Davis, Dr. Sharma, and Rivera. Davis arrived first, relief crossing his face when he saw me. They've barely told us anything, he said quietly as he took the seat beside mine. Same here, I replied. I'm guessing we're about to learn our fate. Dr. Sharma and Rivera entered together, looking tense but composed. Dr. Sharma giving me a questioning look as she sat down. We'll find out soon, I said in response to her unasked question. The doors at the far end of the chamber opened, and 7 Luminans entered, all wearing ceremonial silver robes. I recognized Maris and Theon, but the other 5 were unfamiliar, their expressions solemn as they took their elevated seats, forming a semicircle above us. Maris spoke first, her voice steady and commanding. This emergency session of the Luminant High Council will now commence. Before us are 4 surface representatives who have demonstrated ethical judgment during recent events. We face an unprecedented situation. For 15 millennia, Lumina has remained separate from the surface world, observing but not engaging. That policy has preserved our civilization through countless surface conflicts. Another council member leaned forward, his voice sharp. Yet modern surface technology makes our continued concealment increasingly difficult. Deep earth scanning, expanded mining operations, military bunker systems all threaten accidental discovery. Theon added, his tone measured. Which brings us to our dilemma. The attempted theft of our technology was not unexpected. It follows a pattern we have observed in previous limited contacts with surface military organizations. Then why allow us here at all? Dr. Sharma asked, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. Maris nodded, her expression softening. Because isolation is no longer sustainable. We need reliable surface allies before hostile nations discover us and respond with fear rather than diplomacy. I understood immediately. The Luminans hadn't just been testing us. They were actively searching for trustworthy surface contacts. You've been planning for controlled disclosure, I said, the pieces falling into place. For decades, Theon confirmed. But finding surface representatives who value ethics over national or military interests has proven challenging. Maris continued, her voice steady. What do you propose, James Harrison? You betrayed your mission parameters to prevent theft of our technology. What would you recommend now? All eyes turned to me, the weight of their gazes a physical force that pressed down on me. I took a moment to organize my thoughts, the stakes of my words a blade poised above the future of 2 civilizations. A compromise, I said finally. Allow those of us who have proven trustworthy to return to the surface as official liaisons. We can help develop protocols for controlled information release, while protecting Lumina's most sensitive locations and technologies. Davis nodded beside me, his voice steady. We could establish secure communication channels, identify other surface individuals who can be trusted. The scientific exchange could begin with non-military applications. Dr. Sharma added, her voice trembling with hope. Medical technology, environmental systems, benefits that demonstrate peaceful intentions. The council members conferred quietly among themselves, Maris watching me carefully. "There are factions among us who still advocate complete isolation," she said after a moment. "They fear any surface contact will eventually lead to conflict." "They may be right," I acknowledged, my voice steady. "But isolation is no longer an option. Better to control the disclosure process than wait for accidental discovery." The council withdrew for private deliberation, leaving us alone in the chamber, the four of us speaking in hushed tones, aware that even here we were likely monitored. "Did you know about any of this?" Rivera asked, her voice trembling. I shook my head. I suspected something wasn't right with our mission, but I didn't know the full history. If surface governments have known about Lumina since 1947, Grayson couldn't have been operating completely alone, Davis said, keeping his voice low. "That's what worries me," I replied. "Whoever authorized his operation is still out there." An hour passed before the council returned, their expressions revealing nothing as they took their seats. Maris addressed us directly, her voice steady. "After consideration, the council has reached a decision. We accept the proposal for limited surface liaison, with conditions." Thean elaborated, his tone measured. "First, you will undergo a procedure that creates neural blocks preventing unauthorized information sharing. You will be able to discuss Lumina only with cleared individuals. Second," another council member added, "Luminan representatives will establish a presence in surface governments to monitor compliance and progress." "And what about Grayson and his team?" I asked, my stomach tightening. Maris's expression hardened slightly. "They have received memory modifications. They will recall a failed expedition due to environmental hazards, with no memory of actual contact with Lumina. They will be returned to the surface separately." The implications of such advanced neural manipulation sent a chill through me. If the Luminans could selectively erase or block memory, what other capabilities did they possess that they hadn't shown us? "Do we have a choice about these neural blocks?" Davis asked, his voice steady but laced with unease. "You may decline," Thean replied evenly. "But then you would remain in Lumina permanently." "Not much of a choice," I said, looking at my teammates, who seemed to be thinking the same thing. "I accept the conditions," I said, one by one, the others agreeing. The procedure was non-invasive and painless, conducted in a chamber bathed in pulsing light while wearing a headset of unfamiliar design. I felt nothing during the process, but afterward experienced a strange certainty about what I could and couldn't discuss regarding Lumina. 2 Luminans, Veen and Alara, were selected to accompany us back to the surface, undergoing extensive modifications to their appearance to pass as human. Their height reduced, eyes made smaller, luminescence suppressed through medical means. We departed through a different tunnel system, emerging in northern Canada, the Luminan transit system moving us thousands of kilometers in hours, a military transport helicopter waiting at a concealed exit. No explanations given for how this had been arranged, just another piece of evidence that surface Luminan contacts were more established than we'd been told. 3 days later, I found myself in a nondescript government facility in Nevada, the room a standard meeting space. Conference table, chairs, water pitchers, blank walls, only the lack of windows and subtle security measures hinting at its true nature. Davis sat beside me, Veen and Alara, now dressed in conservative business attire that masked their Luminan features, sat across from us. We'd been waiting for 20 minutes when the door opened, a man in his late 50s entering, his unremarkable gray suit a stark contrast to his penetrating eyes. "I'm Director Calloway," he said without preamble, taking a seat at the head of the table. "I oversee special diplomatic operations for a multinational security council." He looked directly at me, his gaze unyielding. "James Harrison, your actions in Lumina have created quite the situation." "Sir, Grayson was attempting unauthorized technology acquisition," I began, but he raised a hand to stop me. "I'm aware. More aware than you might think." He turned to Veen and Alara, his tone casual but laced with a weight that stunned me. "Welcome to the surface in an official capacity." "You knew about them all along," I said, the realization sinking in like a stone. 5 governments have known about Lumina since 1947, Calloway replied matter-of-factly. "United States, Russia, United Kingdom, China, and a European consortium. We've maintained joint secrecy through a specialized diplomatic channel. He tapped his tablet, a timeline appearing on the wall screen behind him. Decades of covert operations, surveillance, and limited contacts with Luminan outposts. The 1947 incident involved a Luminan transit vehicle that malfunctioned near Roswell, New Mexico. Rather than admit we discovered an underground civilization, the governments involved created elaborate cover stories. If you already had diplomatic channels, why send our team? Davis asked, his voice steady but laced with unease. Calloway's expression hardened. Colonel Grayson's operation was unsanctioned, a rogue initiative by certain military-industrial interests seeking to acquire Luminan technology independently. You're saying you didn't authorize it? I pressed, my voice sharp. The official mission parameters were diplomatic contact only, Calloway replied, his gaze unyielding. We suspected Grayson had additional objectives but allowed the mission to proceed as a test, both of his faction's intentions and Luminan security responses. I understood immediately we were bait, expendable assets in a larger game. I prefer to think of it as an opportunity that served multiple interests, Calloway said, opening a folder on his tablet. Now we face the consequences. The Luminan Council has made their position clear. Either we establish formalized diplomatic relations with proper safeguards, or they will take more drastic measures to ensure their security. What happens to us? Davis asked, his voice steady. You'll both be debriefed extensively, then reassigned according to your skills and the needs of this new diplomatic reality, Calloway replied, then looked directly at me. With one exception, you, Harrison. What about me? I asked, my stomach tightening. Your intervention requires both punishment and proof of our good faith to the Luminans, he said, his tone conversational despite the content. You'll undergo official containment. 5 years in a secure facility in northern Canada. Prison? I said flatly, the word a weight that pressed down on me. A comfortable research station with restricted communication and travel, Calloway clarified. You'll have access to books, entertainment, limited internet. Think of it as a well-appointed exile rather than incarceration. I glanced at Veen and Alara, who remained calm, their expressions unreadable. Is this part of your agreement with the council? It was their suggestion, Alara confirmed, her voice steady. Both as protection for you from those who might disapprove of your choices, and as a demonstration that surface authorities take these matters seriously. 2 days later, I was transported to my containment facility, a former weather research station in the remote forests of northern Canada, repurposed for my unique situation. The facility offered comfortable living quarters, research equipment, and several acres of wooded grounds surrounded by a perimeter fence. My communication with the outside world limited to approved channels and visitors. As I settled into what would be my home for the next 5 years, I wondered if I'd made the right choice. I'd sacrificed my freedom to prevent a technology theft that might have triggered conflict between two branches of humanity. Now I was both prisoner and pioneer, one of the few surface humans fully aware of what lay beneath our feet. Davis visited 3 months into my containment, bringing news of the outside world. He'd been appointed as a liaison between surface military organizations and the Luminan Security Council, working to establish trust between centuries-old adversaries. They've started releasing some of their medical technology, he told me as we walked through the snow-covered grounds of my comfortable prison. Cancer treatment protocols that are decades beyond anything we have. The public thinks it's a breakthrough from conventional research. And the military factions that wanted their defense technology? I asked, my stomach tightening. Still active, still pushing, Davis replied, his expression darkening. But they're being contained for now. Calloway and his counterparts in other governments understand the stakes. As he prepared to leave, Davis handed me a small package from Council Leader Maris, approved by security. Inside, I found a crystal storage device and a handwritten note. For when you're ready to tell the story that both worlds need to hear. I looked up at Davis, questioning. 5 years gives you time to write, James, he said with a slight smile. Who better to explain the future of human relations than the man who stood between two civilizations and chose peace? As his helicopter lifted off, I stood watching the snow swirl around the clearing. The weight of my choice, a quiet comfort amidst the uncertainty. 5 years of exile gave me time to think, to read, to document everything I'd experienced beneath the Antarctic ice. The neural blocks implanted by the luminans remained active. I physically couldn't share restricted information with unauthorized individuals, even if I wanted to. On a rainy Tuesday in April 2018, Director Calloway arrived to inform me my containment period had ended. "You've served your time with remarkable patience, Harrison," he said as we walked the perimeter fence one last time. "The council is satisfied with your compliance." "What happens now?" I asked, my voice steady despite the uncertainty coiling in my gut. "Relocation to Scotland, a small town called Aberfeldy in Perthshire. You'll have a cottage, a modest stipend, and limited supervision. Not freedom exactly, but not containment either." 2 weeks later, I stood in the doorway of a stone cottage overlooking the rolling hills of the Scottish Highlands. The place small but comfortable. 2 bedrooms, a study, a kitchen, and a living area with a fireplace. Large windows facing east to capture the morning light. My new home came with modern amenities disguised within rustic surroundings. High-speed secure internet lines, specialized communication equipment concealed in ordinary-looking furniture, subtle security measures I recognized from my military training. A woman from the village delivered groceries weekly, my neighbors believing I was a retired government researcher writing a book. Not entirely untrue. For all practical purposes, I was free to move within a 50-mile radius, but travel beyond required authorization. 2 unobtrusive security personnel living in the village to monitor without interfering. I established a simple routine. Morning walks through the hills, afternoons of writing, evenings reading by the fire, the isolation suiting me after 5 years of containment. The neural blocks meant I couldn't discuss Lumina with locals, but I found I didn't mind the enforced silence on that subject. 3 months after my relocation, Davis visited for the first time, arriving unannounced on a misty fall morning, driving a nondescript rental car up the narrow lane to my cottage. "Nice place," he said, scanning the surroundings. "Secure enough?" I replied, leading him inside. "Tea, or something stronger if you have it?" I poured 2 glasses of scotch, and we settled in the living room, the fire casting a warm glow against the chill of the morning. Davis had changed in the 5 years since I'd seen him. More gray in his hair, deeper lines around his eyes. "How's your new role treating you?" I asked, my voice steady. "Complicated," he replied, taking a sip of his drink. "I'm officially listed as a special diplomatic liaison attached to NATO, cover for my real work." "And what is your real work?" I pressed, my stomach tightening. "Connecting our worlds and stopping those who want to ruin it," he said, setting his glass on the table and leaning forward. "The integration program has made progress, limited but real. Medical technology exchanges have begun. 3 new cancer treatments introduced through conventional research channels. Environmental monitoring systems deployed to help with climate tracking. The public has no idea where they really came from," I said, the realization sinking in. "Of course not," Davis replied, his voice steady. "Public disclosure remains at least a decade away, according to the timeline." He hesitated, his expression darkening. "But that's not why I'm here." I'd known from the moment I saw his face that this wasn't just a social call. "What's wrong?" "Operation Subterranean Shield," he said quietly, pulling a small device from his pocket. "A privacy field generator, military grade. This will block any surveillance for about 20 minutes. He activated it, then continued. "It's a classified joint military initiative between elements of the US, Russian, and Chinese defense establishments. Black budget. Off the official channels." My stomach tightened, the weight of his words a physical force that pressed down on me. The same factions that sent Grayson, more organized now, more resources. They're developing technologies specifically designed to counter Luminan advantages. Tunnel detection systems, experimental weapons designed to penetrate their shielding, plans to establish military outposts near key access points. "Calloway knows about this?" I asked, my voice steady despite the unease coiling in my gut. "He's fighting it through diplomatic channels, but he's losing ground," Davis replied. "The hardliners make a compelling argument. We need leverage in case the Luminans decide to become hostile. They've had 15,000 years to become hostile, I pointed out, my voice sharp. They've shown remarkable restraint, given how we've behaved. You don't need to convince me, Davis said, checking his watch. I can't stay long, but you needed to know what's happening. Your Luminan friends should know too. After Davis left, I sat by the fire for hours, weighing my options. The neural blocks prevented unauthorized communication about Lumina, but I'd been given a secure channel when I left containment. For emergencies only, Calloway had said. This qualified. The communication device resembled an ordinary e-reader, but contained quantum-encrypted technology developed by Luminan engineers. I activated it and composed a message, the response arriving 3 days later, coordinates in Iceland, a date 2 weeks away, and the simple message, she will meet you there. Arranging travel required Calloway's approval, which I obtained through my secured line, explaining only that I'd received a request for a meeting through authorized channels. Iceland. Calloway's voice carried suspicion, but he approved the request, his office arranging transportation with discreet security personnel monitoring each transfer point. From Reykjavik, a helicopter carried me to a remote field station near the Vatnajökull Glacier, the station appearing as a climate research facility, a cluster of modern buildings nestled against the stark Icelandic landscape. As the helicopter departed, I recognized a figure emerging from the main building, Counselor Theon, looking remarkably human in cold weather gear that hid most of his distinctive features. James Harrison, he greeted me, his voice steady. Welcome to Outpost 7. He led me inside to a conference room where Council Leader Maris waited, 5 years having changed her little, a benefit of Luminan longevity. She wore surface clothing, her distinctive eyes hidden behind specialized contact lenses, her presence as commanding as ever. Thank you for coming, she said without preamble, her voice steady. Your message was concerning. I explained everything Davis had told me.